Santos. Welcome to the Earning Freedom Program. I am Michael Santos with michaelsantos.com and prisonprofessor.com, and today I'm really excited to be sharing with you the first module, the first video module of the Earning Freedom Mastermind Program. I created this program specifically for people who are in custody, whether they're in jail, whether they're in prison, or even for some people who might be living inside or confined or having to go to some type of a school, if you've been identified as an at-risk youth. My purpose is to show you that regardless of where you are right now, you can become something more. You can start sowing seeds for a better life. And I'm coming to you not as if I'm a psychologist or an educator or a probation officer or a counselor. No, I'm somebody just like you. I went to prison in 1987 because of some really bad decisions I started making when I was 20 years old. And in this course, I'm going to share with you the strategies that empowered me through a significant period of time. In fact, it kept me locked up in prisons of every security level for 26 years. So I was in jail for 26 years, but yet every day that I served in those prison environments, I had a high level of energy, discipline, and preparation that would help me come back to society strong, with my dignity intact, ready to begin living a life of fulfillment and relevance and meaning. And it's exactly what I want for everyone who is going through the Earning Freedom Mastermind course. You see, the reality is I feel as though I am a brother to anybody who is living in struggle, to anybody who is in trouble, because I was in there for so long. In fact, as of this day, the day that I'm recording this video, I have still been, more of my life has been spent inside of prisons than outside of prisons. I've been out now for a little over 2 years, and I'm building my career. I have a full-time job, but I'm still very passionate about sharing the strategies that empowered me, because it was lessons I learned from masterminds that truly transformed my life. And so the reason that I call this the Earning Freedom Mastermind course is because I want to share the strategies that really caused me to see things differently. But in order to take you there, I've got to walk you through it. So I'm going to be giving these video modules in 30-minute segments. And they will go along together with this book, the Earning Freedom Mastermind book. And in this book, you'll have the lesson plans. You will also have a series of podcasts that I create, all for the reason is I want to show you that regardless of what struggles or challenges you're going through right now, there is a path that can break you through. But that path requires you to take a very solid, deliberate, disciplined approach. And I want to walk you through that. I'm going to be sharing my own story, and I'm going to be sharing the stories of other people with whom I served significant periods of time. And I want to let you know that if you have any questions at all, if I say anything that you disagree with, I really encourage you, share those questions with your staff member or with your family member and have them send them to me. And I give you my word that I will do my best to respond either through a video message or through a podcast that I create, or I don't have time to write letters to everybody who reaches out to me, but I do like to do these things in this mass way so I can publish it on YouTube. I can put it on iTunes, on the Earning Freedom podcast. I can get this message out because I feel so strongly about sharing this information, because it's this information that truly saved my life back in 1987 when I was staring down the long end of a prison term. I didn't even know how long it was. You see, I saw in 1985 the movie Scarface. Some of you guys may know it, or women who are watching this, you may know that movie and know that, it was a story of Tony Montana, who was played by Al Pacino, Cuban-American. I'm a Cuban-American. My father came to this country hoping to build a better life for his family, and I'm ashamed to say that I disappointed him by being influenced by Scarface, and led me into this role of trafficking in cocaine. I was in that scheme of things for about a little less than 2 years. From the time I was 20 to 22 years old or so. I was arrested when I was 23, and it was the first time that I'd ever been arrested and taken into custody. And at that time, I only wanted one thing. I assume that those of you who are in jail or in custody know what I wanted. It was just to get out of jail. That was the only thing I cared about. I just wanted to get out of jail. And I had an attorney who was telling me everything that I wanted to hear. Basically, he was saying there's a big difference between an indictment and a conviction. turned out to be pretty bad advice, especially in my case, because I absolutely knew that I was guilty. And I proceeded to make every bad decision a guy could make while he was in custody. And meaning, when I say every bad decision, I allowed the scheme to continue even though I was in custody. I mean, I didn't know what I wanted to do. I didn't know if I wanted to plead guilty or go to trial. The only thing I wasn't going to do is I didn't want to testify against anybody else. I just wanted to make it through this sentence, or I wanted to beat the sentence or beat the case. I just didn't know. I was young and stupid and inexperienced and didn't have an idea. And so I was only focused on getting out of jail, and I was delusional, allowing my attorney to misguide me or to misdirect me. And I mean, I take responsibility for that, but at the time, I don't know it. That's all I want. Get out. Well, turned out to be a really bad decision because I was convicted of every count. And it was at that moment that I was convicted of every count that I realized the challenges and the troubles that I had created for my life. And I knew that I had to change. I mean, my grandparents were not speaking to me. I had humiliated my family. My mother and my father were just ashamed of me. I'm sure my sisters were, they loved me and they supported me, but, I was a criminal now. I was in prison. I was in jail, and I was convicted. And I remember going back to my jail cell. I was confined in the Pierce County Jail in Tacoma, Washington. And I remember going back to my jail cell and just praying. And I wasn't a religious person, but, when you're in trouble, you ask God for guidance and strength. And that's what I did. I just asked God, give me the strength to get through this. I wasn't asking to get out of jail because I knew I wasn't going to get out of jail. I was facing a sentence of life without the possibility of parole. The government had charged me with operating what's called a continuing criminal enterprise. And that's a very serious charge. Any charge is a serious charge, but this is a particularly serious drug charge. Effectively, it has three elements. One is you have to have been a leader, meaning that you controlled or managed 5 or more people. There had to have been 3 or more different overt acts. There had to be involved substantial amounts of money. It's frequently known as the Kingpin Statute, and currently it carries a minimum mandatory sentence of 20 years. So it's a very serious charge, particular for anybody. But as a young man, first time coming in, I was just really unprepared to accept responsibility, unprepared to recognize the depth of trouble I had caused for myself. And so when I'm in there awaiting sentencing, I ask God to give me the strength not to get out of jail, but just give me the strength to get through that. And it's through those prayers, I believe. And I'm not trying to give you a spiritual message. I'm simply trying to tell you this is what worked for me. Is I said that prayers, and it led me to this book. Now, at that time, I wasn't a good reader. I'd been a terrible student in high school. I graduated high school with my class, but really at the bottom of my class. Why? Because I was just this reckless kid out for a fast life, trying to have a good time all the time and not paying attention. But I didn't want to do that anymore. I didn't like where I was. And I don't know, I'm sure that everybody who's watching this video in a jail or a prison, you don't like where you are. And so that's why I'm going to share with you this strategy that worked for me. As I started to think back then after those prayers, and I want to read and I want to learn, I start looking for some type of wisdom or some type of guidance someplace. And I'll always remember going into beneath the stairs of the Pierce County Jail in Housing Unit 4 North. I remember finding a book cart. And you've probably seen these kinds of book carts in the institutions where you are, just a thing with a stack of books on it. And I find these 2 books, and they're very thick. They're blue, but they're thick, right? And there's 2 of them. It's a 2-volume set. It's an anthology. And what an anthology is it includes a series of different authors. And this is an anthology of philosophy. So at that time, I don't know what philosophy is. I probably took me a while to figure out even just to enunciate the word. But I'm looking at this book, and I'm thinking, maybe this is the kind of book I need to help me. Maybe this will give me strength. And I take that 2-volume set up to my cell, and I start reading it. And I'm flipping through the pages. It's very difficult for me to read because I didn't have a very good education. I didn't have a very strong vocabulary. And I'm flipping through the pages, and I come across this one story about Socrates. At the time, it it speaks to me because of what I read in the first sentences. You see, Socrates is in jail. He's a philosopher who lived 2,500 years ago, and he was sentenced to death. He was sentenced to death because of the law that existed at that time. It did not allow people from an elite class to teach people from a lower class. And Socrates believed that every person had dignity, that every person had worth, and he wanted to teach everybody. But it was against the law. And so I'm reading this story, and I find this guy who's been sentenced to death, and he receives a visitor from his friend. His friend's name is Crito, and that's effectively the name of this particular story. It's called the Crito. And it's a story about Crito visiting Socrates in his jail cell. And that's what spoke to me. I'm sitting here reading this, and there's this guy in jail. And so I stand up and pay attention because I'm in jail. And I'm facing life without parole. And this guy's sentenced to death. And for me, a life sentence is effectively a death sentence because you're going to be in prison until you die. So I know I can get a message. I want to get this message. And Crito comes to Socrates and he tells him a story. He says, look, don't worry. Nobody really wants you to die. We've already got it arranged. Your supporters, we've paid off everything. We're going to support you in exile. The jailer's going to open the cell for you. You're going to leave here tonight and you're going to spend the rest of your life in peace. And Socrates listens to them. And of course, I think this is awesome. You know, of course he's going to go. That's all I want is to get out of jail. It might be all you want to get out of jail. Socrates listens to him patiently. And he says, well, thank you for bringing, but I'm going to stay. And Crito says, what do you mean? I said, what do you mean? What do you mean you're going to stay? And Crito says, but you're going to die. And Socrates said, yes, I'm going to die. And Crito says, but why would you do that? Why would you stay here and die when I've gone to this trouble and arranged for you to go live the rest of your life in peace and in exile? And Socrates says, well, because I live in a democracy. And in a democracy, I've got to take the good with the bad. And I've taken all the good. This country has clothed me, and it's fed me, and it's protected me from foreign enemies. And I've taken all of that. I've got to take the bad. This is a bad law. But in a democracy, I have the right to work to change laws I don't agree with. I don't have the right to break laws. And I remember when I read that, I remember sitting in that jail cell, feeling as if I suspect many of you sometimes feel, where the walls are closing in, the ceiling's in, it's suffocating you, your hope is being squeezed out of you, and you're separated from the people you love and the people who love you, and you just want to get out. But Socrates changed the way I looked. He helped me to see that I have been living by a bad philosophy. That's when I started to understand I had a bad philosophy. I was always just out for myself, out for the easy way, and all I ever wanted to do was the easy path. Fast money, fast chicks, fast cars, fast boats, all that. And that's what got me into trouble. And I knew I didn't like where I was. I knew I didn't want it anymore. And that's when the moment that I took that book, I remember lying back on my rack, putting it on my chest, and sitting back and thinking about the trouble that I'd caused. I started to introspect. I started to say, God, I'm really put my life on a bad path, and I am in big, big trouble. I'm facing a sentence that's going to keep me in here for a long, long time. And it was those thoughts that totally transformed my life, because I started to figure out, what can I do? What can I do when I'm in here? Is there anything that I can do when I'm in here? Anything at all that will cause my life to be something better than what it is now? And I want to tell you what I learned. I want to tell you that it was this person. That's why Socrates is on the cover of this mastermind book, because he was the mastermind that inspired me. You see, he's there thinking, figuring out. That's what I was doing. That's what I want you to do. I want you to sit there and think. And that's what I'll talk about in the second half of this video. But first, I've got to say a quick message to my sponsors, because I'm so fortunate to be able to create this work that I want to take a moment and thank the organization known as buybelize.com. It is a real estate developer that develops a vacation property and investment property and just extraordinary property in the beautiful country of Belize. And I am so grateful to Buy Belize for sponsoring my work and allowing me this opportunity to spread this message. If anybody is interested in vacation real estate or in owning a piece of paradise, contact me at michael@michaelsantos.com, and I will make the connection. Not only will I make the connection, I will get you a phenomenal deal, such as 0% interest rates. Just really a phenomenal opportunity to own an appreciating asset in an appreciating market. And I'll talk a little bit more about that later. But right now, I just want to get back to this message for my brothers who are in jail or in prison. I want to help them understand what steps they can take to begin transforming their life by learning these lessons from masterminds. And we're going to do it in these 10 videos. So I told you I'd start off by giving you this background and insight into my own transformation when I was locked inside of the Pierce County Jail. But at that moment, I'm thinking, and I asked that question, is there anything that I can do? Well, I know how I feel, and you know how you feel, but that wasn't so important to me, how I feel. I needed to think about how people in the future would feel. And so that's when I started to ask, well, who is important to me? Just as I'm asking you, who is important to you? Because a lot of times in jail, we're told how to live in jail. And we're told in jail that the way to live in jail is to forget about the world outside and just focus on your prison reputation and focus on time in prison, because that's all you can control anyway. I didn't want that. I knew I didn't like living in prison. And I knew I didn't want to listen to this mantra of what it takes to live in prison. I'd gone through that, and it got me convicted, and it got me facing a sentence of life without the possibility of parole. So I started to think about the people I did want to connect with, the people I missed. I thought about my future probation officer. I thought about a future employer. I thought about a future creditor. People I don't know, people who don't know me, people that I won't know for many, many years at that moment. And I started thinking, is there anything I can do when I'm in here? Anything that will cause those people to see me as something different from the person I am today? And the more I just thought about it, the more I realized, yes, there probably is. There probably is something I can do. But I didn't know what it was. I wasn't getting that message, the answer to that, in jail. Just as I don't suspect you are. In jail, you're told, got nothing coming. You can't do the time, don't do the crime. That's what you're hearing from the system, or that's at least what I heard. And what are you hearing from the other people in prison? Well, what I was hearing was that the only thing it takes to survive in here is a ball of hate in your stomach and a knife. I didn't want that. I knew I didn't want that. I knew that I wanted something better. And so I thought about those people, and those people became, you know what they became? They became my avatars. They became the people that I wanted to meet. They became the people whose respect I wanted to earn. And I just put them in my mind. I just thought, what can I do when I am in here that would cause those people to see me as something different from the bad decisions I started making when I was 20? What can I do? And I would encourage you to do the same thing. Think about the people you want to meet, not tomorrow, not next week, but in a year, in 3 years, in 5 years, in 10 years. Think about those people. What would they expect of you so that they will see you as something more than your current challenge or circumstance? That was the key for me, to ask that kind of question. Because the more I started questioning what those people wanted, what I could do for them, the more I started to realize this is my responsibility to figure that out. And if I can figure it out now, I will start today to start building this better life. I will start today sowing seeds for a life that is going to turn into something better than what I have right now. And I didn't even know what I had right now. All I knew was I was facing a life without parole, and I wanted something different. But I could be this person who says I want something different. I had to truly do something about it. And that's what I learned from Socrates, from a mastermind. He was willing to pay a price to have his dignity intact. He said he would not run away from his problems. And as I sat in that jail cell, I said, I'm not going to run away like a coward from problems that I created. I'm going to do something about it. I want to reconcile with society. So I had to think, what would society want? And since I wasn't finding that answer in the jail or the prison, I just had to think. And I came across, the more I thought about it, the more I realized, okay, there is a path. What's it going to be? What am I going to do to find that path? And that's what led me on this path of learning from masterminds. Now, what worked for me isn't going to be the same thing for you. You have to figure out your own code of values. These values have to be, anybody who looks at me, they're gonna know this is what I'm about. They're gonna know this is me. I'm going to be authentic. And that's what I wanted to be. I wanted to be authentic. I want you to think about the way that living an authentic life can transform your life. And I want to show you how it transformed mine. So I started to think, and what I came across was this strategy. And the strategies held that these are the values by which I am going to live. Anybody who sees me right now, they only see me as a coke dealer, a guy who's going to prison. That's what I thought about when I was in that jail cell. But in the future, they're going to see me as something different. And I thought, well, what do I have to do to make them see me as something different? What do they want? And I determined this is what they want. They want me to focus on educating myself. That's going to be important. If I focus on educating myself, then other people will see me as something different from what I am. Why? Because it takes a lot of work to educate yourself. So that's going to be very important for me while I'm in here. And second, they're going to want more than just an education. Because I sold coke. I'm in prison. I'm in jail. I'm going to jail for a long time. I'm going to be there for a long time. What can I do? And I'll tell you what I came up with. They're also going to want me to contribute to society in some kind of meaningful, measurable way. I don't know how I'm going to do it at that moment, but I know that's what they're going to want. So I've got to figure that out. And we'll talk a little bit more about how I figured that out. But in the beginning, that's education and contribution to society. Two big things. But that wasn't going to be enough. I needed to do more. And so I came across, with more thinking, as I sat in that jail cell, like that, staring at the wall, staring at the ceiling. The other thing I should do is build a support network. I've got to find people that I don't know, people who don't know me, and I got to persuade those people to believe in me. If I can find people and persuade them to believe in me, I think that's going to help. And those three principles became my guiding light. They were like a compass for me. And I said, I'm going to spend every day I can in here focused on those three principles. That's how I'm going to reject the negativity that exists in prison. That's how I'm going to reject the criminal lifestyle. That's how I am going to make every decision thinking about, what do my avatars want? What are the people I'm going to meet in the future? What do they want? How am I going to earn their trust? How am I going to earn their respect? And if I do that, will they see me as something different? And I believed that it would. Focus on education, focus on contribution to society, and focus on building a strong support network. If I can do that, that, I believe, would result in me coming out of prison differently from the way that I am now. And that's all that I wanted. I wanted to live a life of relevance while I was inside, a life of meaning. I wanted to live a life of contribution and significance and say, I want to be something more than the bad decisions I had made that put me here. If I can do that, if I can focus on that, I truly believe life is going to open for me. Opportunities are going to open for me. But today is when I draw my line in the sand. Today, I'm going to begin making those changes. And so I remember getting up. I still remember today as clearly as if it happened this morning. I'm sitting in a jail cell. It's dark, like 2 a.m. I'm coming up with this idea. I finally come up with this model that's going to get me out of jail or strengthen my mind, strengthen my life. And I sit up and I said, okay, well, today's going to be, as they say for the old cliche, today's going to be the first day in the rest of my life. But if I'm going to draw this line in the sand, I've got to really take action. I've got to truly make a commitment, understanding that not everybody's going to believe, but this is the day, today. And that's what I'm asking you. Make today the day. Today. If you haven't done it already, make today the day. And what I did, I don't even have a pen here on my desk. I wish that I did because I'd show you what I did. I picked up a pen. You know the types of pencils that exist in many jails. For security, they're only the size of a finger. But I took up that pencil and I wrote a letter. It was the first of tens of thousands of letters that I wrote. But I'll tell you about that. But I went and I wrote a letter to the newspaper because the newspaper had been covering my trial, talking about me being a kingpin and arrested and convicted and, all that stuff. And I wrote a letter to the newspaper and I said, look, I'm sorry. I made a lot of bad decisions, but I'm going to make better decisions. And if you want to know the story about how I got involved in trafficking in cocaine and what I learned from the process and what I'm going to do while I'm in here, come visit me. Next day, or maybe a week later, a journalist came to see me. The journalist had been covering my trial, interviews me for several hours, results in a full, massive front page story in the newspaper that had covered me, and had my picture on the front page of the paper. Came out on a Sunday, the Sunday before sentencing. And this newspaper article, what I told the journalist, I said, I'm going to use every day that I'm in here working to reconcile with society. And I'm going to focus on becoming a better citizen because that's what I want to be. I want to be a good citizen. This country, as Socrates said, has clothed me and fed me and protected me from foreign enemies and educated me. And I failed my community. And I failed my parents. And I failed all of the people who believed in me. And as a consequence of these bad decisions, I'm going to pay a heavy price. I don't know what that price is, but I know I'm going to pay a heavy price, as measured with not months, not years, but likely decades in prison. And while I'm in there, I'm going to focus on reconciling with society. And that was the day that I drew a line in the sand. That was the day that I said, I'm done being a criminal. To go back to that movie, Scarface, that influenced me, there's another scene in that movie where Montana is in the restaurant. Some of you may remember it. And he says, say goodbye to that bad guy. It's the last time you're going to see another bad guy like this again. and I remember seeing that. It was funny, of course, he didn't go on to transform his life. He went deeper into the mix. But that was the day that I said, I'm not going to be a criminal anymore. I'm going to be a good citizen. I'm going to find a way to prove worthy of the people who love me, the people that I hurt. I'm going to find a way to connect with society because I missed society, as you may miss society right now. But if I can execute this plan, focus on education, focus on contributing to society, focusing on building a support network, I'm going to come out of here differently. And that's the same thing that can happen to you. And I'd love to say that this is my world and my lessons and I'm the mastermind, but that's not true. It all began, for me, with Socrates. Socrates is the one who inspired me. That's why I call this the Mastermind Course. And through the rest of this course, I'm going to share many other masterminds that I met and that influenced me through the journey. And I just want you to consider them. And I hope that you will be able to find a way to incorporate these strategies into your life and that you can begin sowing your seeds for a better future. So I'm Michael Santos with michaelsantos.com, and I've got a request for those who are listening to this podcast or this video in society. If you're doing that, please help me inspire the people that I care about, people who are in prison. Help me position them to come back to society strong. And the way that I'm going to ask you to do that doesn't cost you a penny. Go to iTunes, subscribe to the Earning Freedom podcast, rate and review the show. It's free, and that's how we get more distribution on the iTunes platform. And I hope you'll help me reach more people in prison. Thank you very much. I am Michael Santos with michaelsantos.com and prisonprofessor.com.